Welcome. Well, you are at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. And we're delighted that you have welcomed us into your home. You know, we'd love to hear from you, so send us an email with a question or a comment to jimandjoy@ewtn.com. Well, today it's Friday, and we're going to bring to you the second part of our show with Kevin Dunn, who is an outstanding filmmaker, a pro-life speaker, and he's produced a film called Fatal Flaws. You can go to the website fatalflawsfilm.com. Also, you can go to his website dunmedia.ca. And Kevin is just blowing the cover on the dark culture of death with a euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide and bringing it to our light.
And he's going to emphasize in this show today, he'll mention Fatal Flaws again. I hope everybody does go to the website, fatalflawsfilm.com, that you want a screening, you know how you can support this film. And he's going to be speaking about, so what do we do? What do we do as a Christian people, as a Catholic people, as maybe you're not even religious, but people who understand that the wedding of medicine and government in the killing of the most vulnerable of our people is an evil. How do you stand against that? And how do we become, Kevin likes to speak about, how do we become, in the most vulnerable people's lives who are targeted in this way, a reason for their tomorrow? A reason. So all of us are called, with the weak and the helpless, to be a reason of hope and to give them another tomorrow. So Kevin Dunn will be with us in just a moment. Don't go away. It's going to be a profound show. We'll be right back.
Welcome. Well, you are at home with Jim and Joy, and today we bring to you again Kevin Dunn, a fabulous prophetic filmmaker, a pro-life speaker. He has a great movie called Fatal Flaws. Well, you can go to his website. It's fatalflawsfilm.com. Also, you can go to dunmedia.ca to find out how you can get Kevin to bring his film to your place.
Kevin, this work is just so important. When I first saw it, it drew me back to a film that I saw years back before I was involved in the pro-life movement. Whatever Happened to the Human Race, it was called, sort of at a YMCA, and really dealt with this issue of what happens when nations abandon the sacredness and dignity of the human person and the defense of the person. What would happen? And he traced what would happen regarding abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, because he was a philosopher, a historian, just did it. When I saw your film, it was the same thing. I said, if people see this film, they'll get it. The light bulbs will go off. They'll have, Lord willing, an epiphany and say, I didn't understand this, the dimensions of this, and what can we do to stop this? So just tell us a little bit more, summarize for us again, why this film and what it's about, what you're trying to expose.
Well, I joined forces with the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition because we both had similar interest in creating a film that would, as you said, blow the lid off the deception behind this movement to create laws that would allow doctors the right in law to end the life of their patient. Because as soon as you do that, you set a bar. You set a bar here and say anything below this bar is not worthy of living. And that puts a tremendous amount of pressure to those who are vulnerable about burden and about why should I live, and of course that line keeps getting pushed up by people who say my life is not worthy. When the answer should be us as a caring Christian community. And so I mentioned the EPC, Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, because they were touting this long before my friend Alex Schadenberg, long before any of this was ever around, at least in Canada and the U.S.
You know, you keep talking about the standard changes, and so it begins to relate to more and more people, more and more situations. But finally, the ultimate standard is you set the standard. We're not going to set the standard anymore. So it's not going to be, here's what qualifies you for this. You just need to say, I'm hopeless. I have this degree of pain. I don't desire to live. You set the standard, say it clearly, here's how you say it, and we'll help you.
They're actually discussing a law in the Netherlands right now. It's called the completed life law, where if even it's outside of the euthanasia law, that says if my life is, I'm done. I'm pretty much done with life. Please give me an over-the-counter medication. So this is where these laws have gone, and they, we talk about these incremental expansions of the law.
Yeah.
The best law is no law in this particular situation, because we don't need it. We do not need this, and so we have to get out there. And even where these laws exist, we do have to become, as you said, the reason for someone.
What do people find when they go to fatalflawsmovie.com?
Fatalflawsfilm.com.
Okay.
They'll find trailers from the movie. They'll find a place for us to, a place for you to request. I do speaking engagements all around the world right now, and I have a powerful talk that seems to be gaining very anyway. I love giving it. People seem to be very receptive. Called "Living, Dying, and the Power of Presence."
Say it again.
Living, dying, and the power of presence.
Presence.
Yes, and so I'm giving that talk as well as doing the film.
And they could reach you by going to that website.
Yep.
Okay. Well, now you're in process of developing another film in relationship to assisted suicide, euthanasia. Why another film? What is this focused on?
Well, the first two films, Euthanasia, Deception, and Fatal Flaws, dealt with the issues, because really when it comes down to it, we don't need faith arguments in order to make the point that these laws are no good for society. All we have to do is go to Belgium or the Netherlands or Canada and the U.S. to see how these laws continue to expand. The question now becomes, what do we do as a faith community? What do we do as Catholics, as Christians? What is the response to all of us, whether from any faith background or no faith background? What do we do? What is even where these laws exist? And the answer was given to us by Jesus himself. What was Jesus doing when he was with the woman at the well? What was Jesus doing when he was with Peter's mother-in-law? He was present. He was present in the lives of everyone he touched, whether it was 3 minutes or his whole 3-year ministry. He was present to those people, and he gave everyone hope. And that is our call. And so the name of the movie is the new film that we're in development. We're filming right now. Is called I, Samaritan. I, Samaritan.
Why out of all the parables that one? Or stories? Well, it wasn't a parable, really. I guess he's speaking to somebody who said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Love God, love your neighbor. Who is my neighbor? And he tells a story. I guess it is a story. Why that?
Well, I think you nailed it. Who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? My neighbor is my mother, who needs that visit. I go over to visit my mom and dad on a Saturday morning, and of course I love to do it. But still, I love it. They love it. Gives them a reason. Gives me a reason. There's friends and family. There's people we don't even know right up the road at a nursing home that need our help. We can be the Samaritans. In the Samaritan, there's four different people we chose to center on the movie. There's four different. There's the passersby, which I forgive me, Lord, I've been that passerby that looks at people and says, you know what, that's their monkey, that's their circus, I'm not going to get involved, and we become disengaged and we'll walk by. There's the Samaritan who says, you are my neighbor, and dives in to help. And then there's the actual, the hospice,
The innkeeper.
The innkeeper, thank you. The innkeeper that takes care of the people, the Catholic and the Christian hospitals out there that have to hold true to that purpose of being present and that purpose of providing good care and good pain management. But then there's the fourth character, which sometimes we overlook. And that is the character of the actual person on the side of the road, ourselves. When we're in that position, when people are coming to help us, are we going to seclude into ourselves and say, I give up on life? Or am I going to allow you to be that servant, that good song, will you let me be your servant? It's difficult when we feel we're a burden. But in many ways, we're helping others when we allow them to help us.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all need to recover, because void of all of this has been the voice of the church. You have the government, you have the medical community, you have the culture screaming, We determine when we die, where is the voice of the church, and then what is the church's response?
Absolutely. And our call as Christians is to be that Samaritan. And so in Canada, there was a case of a young girl named Candace Lewis. And Candace has lived with cerebral palsy her whole life, and yet her mother was that good Samaritan through thick and thin, even when the doctors suggested assisted suicide. I did bring a clip,
Yes.
if
We
it's
wanna see
okay.
that.
Let's go to it right now.
Yeah.
Let's go to the clip with Candace Lewis and her story.
If I had to go ahead and do what the doctors wanted me to do, I wouldn't have had her.
What was that?
Well, they wanted me to do assisted suicide death on her.
This is your story. You said a couple of things on the CBC News story. I remember they said, did you want to die? And what did you say?
I don't want to.
She got sick here at home. We got the ambulance. When we got her to the hospital, she was having seizures. They had to give her medication, take her heart rate down. Her heart rate was very high, top of 170. This doctor that was seeing her first, and he came in and he told me that her kidney wasn't in the right spot. He told me the lower parts of her lungs had collapsed, so they admitted her. And the next day, when he came in, he took me out in the hallway and he just stood me up against the wall and he told me about assisted suicide death was legal in Canada. And I said, well, he asked, did I know? And I said, no. And then he said he was all for it. And I said, well, that was your choice. And I told him I wasn't interested in anything to do with assisted suicide death. And he told me, he said I was being selfish and he wanted to assist me in doing this. And I said, I'm not interested. I more or less walked away from her. She heard everything.
Yeah.
And
You heard what the doctor said?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Not feeling good.
like not once did she ever say to them, I want to end my life. Not once.
You said they talked about it a lot. Did they talk about it a lot with you?
Yeah.
And this doctor came in and next day after he told me about the assisted suicide death and stuck his face down in hers and said, do you know how sick you are? And I'm just like, and when I got his eyes contact, I went my eyes like that to get out in the hallway, and I told him, I said, don't you ever pull something like that again.
So at that time, were you worried that Candace was going to die?
They had us told me that she was dying. I believed them. They were the doctors, and she was so sick. But I told her if she wanted to go, it was good. She could go. But she didn't. She don't cry, honey. But she didn't want me to be alone. Don't cry. It's all done now. It's over. We just don't want it to happen to anybody else, hey?
No.
Don't want another family to go through this.
Thank you so much for bringing their faces and their story to us and hopefully to millions of people that will watch Fatal Flaws. Now, was that taken from Fatal Flaws, or
Yes.
okay?
So that was one of the most powerful stories in Fatal Flaws. But as we started developing I, Samaritan, we said, we need to pull maybe a couple of those stories of really solid Samaritans
Yeah.
in order to underscore what our response should be as good Christians. Who are we standing beside? Is it a loved one? Is it someone
Yeah.
that needs us to stand beside them? There's so many. I recall my dad having cancer a few years ago, and you
That's
know,
in the film too.
yeah.
You start off with it.
And you know, we need to be with people. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
We spend so much time on ourselves, and Jesus says, "Look out."
Right.
And so, be the Samaritan.
Well, she was an interesting Samaritan, the mother,
Yes.
you know, because I like both of her things. I mean, love, the hope, the tenderness, but she said, don't ever pull that stuff with me again, you know, whatever she said.
You might be the
And
doctor, but this
you know,
is my daughter.
We need to get ready for that, for those suggestions.
Yeah,
And if they can't do themselves, that other people need to say, I know where you're going with that. We don't go there. We give care. We don't kill, you know?
And it's not about vilifying doctors, and we're not saying doctors are bad or anything. Doctors, so many good doctors out there. What we are saying is when we impose these laws upon the doctors, it's going to be just that, it's going to suggest that some lives are not worthy of living. And in this case, that was the actual case. Your life is not worth living. Do you know how sick you are?
Right.
And therefore, talk to Mom about medical aid and dying. We've got to get to the point where that is just not the case.
Well, the answer is, I mean, is that care, but a life not worth living is the direct opposite of the teaching of the church and of the natural law, really. I mean, we know inherently, as well as the teaching of the church, you're sacred, you have dignity, you have worth, you have value, and it should be, how dare we move in this other direction? But there must be some weaknesses and cracks in the church that we need to really restore and build up so that we could be life-affirming. And you know, people need to hear that from other people. So we just can't like affirm ourselves as much as we do. We need to have people that affirm people, pull out the dignity of that person and hold it before them, say this is who you really are, and put it back in and say, there, be at home in there. You know, you're sacred.
Cardinal Collins in Toronto, Cardinal Thomas Collins, he's been on the forefront of fighting these laws, and he says, you know, it's not about what we can do, he says, it's about who we are as sons and daughters of God. That is what we have to focus on, no matter our state, no matter our condition, whether we're able-bodied walking around, or whether in a wheelchair, or whether we're in a hospital bed. There is intrinsic value. We have an intrinsic value to those around us and to ourselves as sons and daughters. We also were able to interview for this film Cardinal Willem Eyck from Utrecht in the Netherlands. I mean, here's a guy who started off in the medical profession when they were talking about these laws, and he had to make a decision. We had to make a decision, and we included him in the film. Actually, I brought a little clip of him.
Perfect.
Let's go to that right now. Let's see the Cardinal.
The main cause of all this is, of course, culture. And it is not so easy to change a culture. When I started as a medical doctor in the University Hospital in Amsterdam, and I was practically the only one who said, no, I don't accept euthanasia because of my faith, my Roman Catholic faith. From that moment that I started as a medical doctor till now, I'm confronted with a lot of developments in this field. The only thing that I have observed since then is a slippery slope.
There are a lot of people aging who are watching this program, including me.
Oh yeah.
Who may feel when they get ill, or as they get older, that they will become a burden to their family, that they'll become a burden to the hospital, to the person who needs the hospital bed. When these feelings arise, how should we react to them?
I think that's a very good point, because many old people are struggling with the idea, I'm a burden. And at a certain moment, when they say, well, you know, I'm getting old, my children have to take care of me. So these feelings of guilt are very real, but they are enforced from the moment that there are possibilities to ask for euthanasia and assisted suicide. I am a unity of soul and of body. The mind is not, you know, the person itself. The person is the mind, soul, and the body. When people are suffering, we should not think of the termination of life as a solution, but we should ask, why are they suffering? The idea of palliative care is creating a community with the patients, family members, volunteers, medical staff, nurses, etc., so that they start to live again.
Seems like your two films on euthanasia are really so informative. It's there. It can be a little bit depressing listening to it. But what are you trying to do with I, Samaritan? It seems like you're trying to give an answer, to give a hope, to equip.
When we finished the film, and all the screenings of Fatal Flaws and Euthanasia Deception, the number one question people ask is, what can I do? What can I do tomorrow? And I say, there's two things. Obviously, we have to deal with these laws. We have to inform our members of parliament. We have to inform our senators, our state representatives. We have to get them informed, put the film in front of them, say, at least watch this other side. But then there's that thing, what can I do tomorrow? What can I do today? And the today is becoming the Samaritan. The today is befriending that person in the going and playing Scrabble. My daughter tells this story of going to play Scrabble with this woman for over a year. And the woman actually asked her about assisted suicide and said, you know, this is something that I'm considering. And she said, wait a minute, I'm part of your family. I can be there for, I love you. You really love me? She said, yes, I do. I enjoy this time together. She said, well, I guess I won't be thinking about that anymore.
So yeah.
Right.
There's a change when people feel loved, and that's the call, to be the Samaritan.
This film is under construction. How can people support your work?
Through Dunn Media, through our dunnmedia.ca, there's a place to donate there. We're looking for some big contributors in order to dramatize. We're going to re-dramatize, tell that story again of the Good Samaritan, only in this case through the eyes of those 4 characters that we talked about, and most of all, through the eyes of Christ, who called us all to be that Good Samaritan.
Kevin Dunn, thank you so much for being a voice, a clarion call for God's people to rise up and to stand upon the wall, to stand in the breach, and to declare a new culture of life. We'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, Father Joseph joins us today. And Father, we want your perspective on the things that Kevin was sharing with us.
Both on Wednesday and then this show as well, what was most powerful to me is that fear that he talked about. That's the motivation that's driving people to euthanasia, is this fear of being a burden, fear of medical procedures that you might have to go through. But what does 1 John chapter 4 say? Perfect love casts out all fear. And that's what we saw in that beautiful story of Candace that brought you to tears, that there's this beauty of love, isn't there?
Wow.
You know, you think about that, and I recognized in that Fatal Flaw, a clip that we had on Wednesday, one of the doctors in Oregon, and he told a story, I don't think it's in the film perhaps, of when his own parents were declining, and they lived hundreds of miles away. He brought them there. He talked about the last 2-3 years, how close they got, the bonds that were developed, because there was this love that developed in caring for them in their elderly years. And so it can be a beautiful time. We can think of the word compassion means suffer with. You're going to suffer with them in their infirmities, their struggles, but what's going to come out of that is this flowering of love. Love casts out all fear.
Right, and that's going to make us a better human being. You know, we always think like that fear on the end of life is the same fear that causes a mother to choose abortion. I'm afraid what's going to happen to me? What about my plans? I'm afraid to tell my parents. I'm afraid, and it's all fear. And it's all fear that drives us all to this culture of death.
Right.
Well, you know, the real battle in this thing is suffering and what it is and what it can do and how we see it. We have to change the way we see, and we'll change. And so where they're going with this is, the criteria is if you're suffering and you say you're suffering, we can alleviate. It's the alleviation of suffering movement. Who doesn't want that? I'll vote for alleviation of suffering. Oh, you're talking about, here, I'm going to help you kill yourself. Or we have the Catholic teaching on the gospel of suffering. John Paul II said, the gospel of suffering. Not that we were looking for suffering, we're going over, but that God uses suffering. He cleanses, He purifies, He redeems, makes us dependent, glorifies Himself within it. This is the time for the church to preach the gospel, the true gospel. And because this is the battle. They're going to say suffering is this, kill yourself. People are going to be checking out all over the place. Young people, how many young people think their life is over already?
And how many times haven't I heard in my own show that I do as well, that people say, you know, we go there to help them, but they ended up blessing us. I received more than I gave. And so I'm excited about this I Samaritan project, because that's what we're called to do. We're going to discover our own value, worth in loving others.
Amen.
And being rich in helping those.
Father, give us a prayer and a blessing that we might do these things.
Father, we thank you for this new initiative of I Samaritan and also the other projects. Bring your light to this world so much in darkness today. Teach us how to love, as you did through your example and now through your grace. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Don't forget our ongoing coverage of World Youth Day from Panama. Check out the EWTN website for events and showtimes in your area, also Saturday. Don't forget the Walk for Life West Coast. Our coverage will begin at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's been great to be with you today, to be the people of God together. As Kevin Dunn says, when we become the Good Samaritan to the elderly, the disabled, and the marginalized, we become the reason for people's tomorrow. Become the reason for somebody's tomorrow. Life, marriage, and family will prevail. Keep it on EWTN. Bye now.